Hello, I'm Melissa Ridgen with your APTN National News Weekend. The Federal Court of Appeal has dealt the Trans Mountain Expansion Project a major blow, ruling Canada had not fulfilled its duty to consult with the First Nations on the pipeline. Here's APTN's Tina House with reaction from the Squamish Nation in British Columbia.
It's a celebration for First Nations who fought a long, hard battle to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline. From the land to the water, and now to Canada's highest court.
Today, we won in court against this project.
Eugene Kung is one of the lawyers who represented the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, one of the nations who opposed the project.
This is a decision that combined at one point 16 different appeals. At the end of the day, it was 14. And those were the appeals to the National Energy Board process and recommendation, as well as the federal government's decision.
In the federal court's decision today, they described consultation with First Nations as short of the mark. They also said that there is a critical error made in basing their decision on the National Energy Board's illegal decision to exclude marine shipping from its review. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip has been adamantly opposed to the project since the very beginning.
I was, really taken aback by the decision. The extent of the decision, upholding all of our arguments, our legal arguments, our political statements over the last number of years, and I just couldn't believe it. What you see on my face is my smile. I'm not known for my smile, but this is it.
And just a half hour after the ruling, Kinder Morgan shareholders voted with a 99% certainty to continue to sell the Trans Mountain Pipeline to the federal government of Canada.
Now they have a lame duck expansion, a lemon as some called it, except Canada also made the lemon. They also grew the lemon that they then bought. So in terms of the sale, it's an even worse deal now for Canada.
Elder Amy George is the daughter of the late Chief Dan George. She has been fighting against the pipeline for 10 years and was even arrested up on Burnaby Mountain. She's also walked near the tar sands.
On the walk, I saw one bird that was dead on the ground. I've seen pictures of them pulling a big black bear out of the trailing ponds, and that's where it started. The first time I ever talked, I said, sometime in your life, it's time for you to put down your remote control and your Game Boys and warrior up, I told my people.
The federal government announced that they are determined to see this project through despite the court ruling. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Another Manitoba Hydro project is under fire as a new report reveals a culture of discrimination and harassment at the Kiosk Dam site. It's the latest on a pile of reports showing decades of abuse by hydro workers working at camps in these First Nations communities in northern Manitoba.
Hydro development in Manitoba has been a contentious issue between Indigenous peoples and the province for decades. But disturbing allegations of physical and sexual abuse and the level of racism are just now coming to light in newly released reports. Recent testimony involved projects dating back as far as the 1960s. Now, an independent report is coming to light that found a culture of discrimination and harassment at a project currently under construction. The former Grand Chief for First Nations in northern Manitoba says it's still ongoing.
Yes, I've heard of cases where women have been attacked by workers as recently as last month, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing to know that these kind of attitudes still are affecting our people in a very negative way and putting people's lives in danger.
The Kiosk Generation Project is a multi-billion-dollar development being undertaken in a partnership by Manitoba Hydro and 4 First Nations. People who took part in a culture assessment review in 2017 spoke of their fear of retaliation for raising their concerns. But among those raised included living in jail-like conditions, with some referring to the camp as Kioskatres. Others are quoted as saying there's too much discrimination towards Indigenous workers. An employee who said they were called Seal Eater, Squaw, and Pocahontas. Concerns are also raised about drugs and alcohol at the site. Manitoba Hydro says as of August 2018, 63 of the 64 recommendations in the report have been completed. The province called in the RCMP to look at earlier allegations. North wants to see an outside organization involved.
Absolutely. I think that every time that there's RCMP involvement in anything, there has to be an independent body that comes in and monitors the investigation and does the investigation. I don't think it's fair to anyone, not even to the RCMP.
A spokesperson for Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a decision on whether it will launch its own probe into the earlier disturbing allegations of abuse is expected this week. A committee has also been set up by the province. North would like to see a process for victims to have their voices heard in a way that makes them feel safe and secure.
Here's an update now on a story we first told you about earlier this month. It's about Brittany Martel, who went missing from Hay River, Northwest Territories. Her body was found near Merritt, British Columbia. Here's Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs.
That's weird. It's clues like this Dolly Martel clings to.
I've watched it over and over again. I've paused it so many times looking for something, anything that could tell me. Like I've Googled how far the distance from where that was to where she was found.
This dash cam footage is of Dolly's niece, Brittany Martel. It shows Brittany on the highway where she died, alive.
The guy in the video that took the dash cam, him and his wife were thought it was strange that she was. It looked like she was waiting for somebody, like she was, because she was walking backwards in a one-way traffic lane, and it was just kind of strange to them. It just looked like she was waiting for somebody.
The family has also received photos like this from individuals who attended a candlelight vigil for Brittany near where she was found, immediately after the RCMP had searched the area and deemed the case not suspicious. Brittany's personal belongings were also found by the public a few kilometers from where she was discovered, after the police say they had searched the area.
We have built a timeline for where we believe Brittany was and coming from and going to and that kind of thing. So we have nailed down what we think very accurately how she came to be up there, but just don't know what caused her death. So we're no more closer in that regard than we were last time we spoke.
Makes me really angry. Like, you know, the longer that this is prolonged, it just feels like Brittany's case is just going to be swept under the rug.
BC coroners are waiting on toxicology results, not expected till October. The family says they wish the RCMP would interview more people Brittany hitchhiked with, like her boyfriend.
Like, he was physically taken off the bus by the bus driver because he was getting violent with Brittany on the bus.
As the investigation continues, the family mourns their loss.
My baby would have been born like 4 days before her birthday. That's my due date. Her birthday is September 16th.
Yeah.
And I'm due the 12th, so.
Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Kaladeche, First Nation.
A big funding announcement to help Indigenous students in Thunder Bay. As Willow Fiddler reports, it's in response to the 7 Youth Inquest recommendations.
$5.6 million from the National Crime Prevention Strategy for the city of Thunder Bay. The money is for a 5-year project to help support students attending high school in the city.
I mean, the money at the end of the day is about making sure that every young person, including vulnerable Indigenous people, feel like they're part of this community, feel like they have places to go when they're struggling, feel like they have alternatives to unhealthy community that exists in pockets of our communities that prey on young people who are feeling vulnerable.
The announcement comes 2 years after 145 recommendations were delivered to several stakeholders like the City of Thunder Bay and the federal government on how to keep students here safe. An inquest in 2015 examined the deaths of 7 First Nation students. All 7 had left their communities and families to attend high school in the city. The city's crime prevention coordinator says this money will help incoming youth and those already here.
We will be able to implement programs that have been developed and designed to address the needs of youth coming to Thunder Bay from northern communities, and also youth who are currently living in Thunder Bay who may find themselves at risk.
Starting this fall, more than a dozen community partners like the police and Fort William First Nation will begin working with youth aged 12 to 24 at 3 neighborhood locations and in 2 schools. Brad Battiston is the principal at Matawa Learning Center, where students from 5 First Nations attend.
It's significant for us because it's about peace of mind, and it's about having students, the more connected they feel, the more comfortable they feel, the more likely they are to succeed and stay in school and in Thunder Bay.
81 inquest recommendations were made to the federal government. This is their first direct response to one of them, but Minister Hydro said many others are also being addressed.
But things like making sure that we increase funding to education on reserve, those things are already underway. The improvements to living conditions and infrastructure needs in First Nations, some of those things came up as well in the inquest recommendations. But the work that we're doing, investing billions of dollars, ensuring that there's equity in First Nations and that First Nations communities can move forward in skills training, for example, in my portfolio, all fit within the recommendations of the inquest.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, slow internet and no internet troubles in Nunavut and northern Manitoba. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's not unusual to see extreme sports enthusiasts pushing their limits in northern climes, but what happens when they push those limits too far and get themselves in extreme trouble? Here's Charlotte Moore-Jacobs again.
It's a 100-foot drop to the bottom. And for some, it's one heck of a ride. Earlier this month, a group of kayakers took on Alexandra Falls, located near Enterprise, Northwest Territories. A few were injured. One person was concussed, another ended up with a broken leg, and it took responders hours to rescue them.
Since the first professional kayaker took on the falls in 2003, this site has become increasingly popular with thrill seekers. But that's not necessarily an issue, although many people have different opinions on it.
For Darlene Lamb, she first found out about it over social media.
Some people are like, oh, they're just having fun, or, you know, it's let them do their thing. It's not your life. And then there's the other side where it was disrespectful to the Dene.
The falls lie in the ancestral homeland for the Dene. Jeff Fabian says there's a rich history with the falls.
This area is definitely sacred. I mean, there are thousands of stories about this place. It's significant. It's a landmark for us. During wars, we had families that would, if they were scattered, they would come here to reconnect with lost warriors or anybody else.
When Fabian heard that some locals were angered by the kayakers' actions, he says he wanted to make a distinction between respect and protection.
When I've learned, usually sites that are sacred would be places like where we bury our dead, or those places we don't touch, those places we do protect, and those places that we place high respect on. That's not to say that we don't respect this place. That's just, other than sacred burial sites or clearings that we've made for ourselves, we don't really leave any trace where we go. And things of nature like falls, river system, waterways, lakes, they're things that belong to nature, and nature isn't something so weak as to need protection.
The one kayaker that did make it over the falls unharmed says the group could have known more history on the falls beforehand.
When you're actually there in the parking lot of Alexandra, we never really noticed anything, but it is definitely interesting to learn about that. And yeah, for the most part, we know a lot of kind of the history and the background of stuff, but for Alexandra, we weren't quite aware of that.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Alexandra Falls, near Enterprise.
Nunavut has some of the slowest download speeds in the entire country. That is a problem if you want to update a game. It is a much bigger problem when you want to update your internet security. Our Kent Driscoll explains the cost of being slow to Nunavut from this in Iqaluit.
If you live in Nunavut, you probably know what this means. It means you'll be waiting to watch Netflix. All of our internet comes via satellite and it is slow. CIRA is responsible for the .ca domain name, and they also help plan Canadian internet connectivity. Their most recent visit to Iqaluit was an eye-opener.
We've been plugged in entirely on our cell networks and streaming from that, because a lot of the other internet we've been trying to log into, we haven't even been able to do our jobs.
CIRA have an idea for Iqaluit, a central server that downloads popular updates and stores it locally. That way, instead of every PlayStation or PC in town trying to update Fortnite via satellite, it all happens once, and we all just download it here in Iqaluit.
So we've been involved in communities across more southern Canada to create what's called internet exchange points. So they're essentially locations where Canadian networks and content providers can exchange their traffic locally to keep data in Canada and help just make the internet more resilient and faster.
Slow internet is a fact of life here in Nunavut. While that can be a pain when you want to watch a movie, but if you want to download a security update for Windows, that's worse than a pain. That's a security risk.
The difficulty in patching networks. So when we talk to technicians at the government of Nunavut, and it's Windows patch day, and they have, they have to download patches, or even residents, and everyone's trying to download the latest iOS update, and no one can actually get it because the network's saturated, and that puts everyone at risk.
Nunavut falls behind the rest of Canada in many ways. The internet is just one, but a huge one. Everything from medical imaging to shopping in the territory has an online component. A wait like this for updates is common. This update may be for a game, but Nunavut's internet future is not one. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Negotiations over a massive high-speed internet contract for remote First Nations in Manitoba seem to have slowed to the speed of dial-up. In January, the federal government announced it would be investing $43 million through the Connect to Innovate program. Since then, talks between the groups involved with construction of the fiber optics line have stalled. Brittany Hobson brings us more.
A group of First Nations in Manitoba are calling out the federal government over a project to close the connectivity gap in remote and rural communities in Manitoba. In January, the government said they would be working with several groups to complete the project. Now one group is saying communication has shut down.
Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond our controls, we could not come to an agreement, and we left the bargaining table to stand for our rights to control and own this network that is going to change the lives of our people.
Chief David Crate is a co-chair of Clear Sky Connections, an Indigenous-owned group originally involved in the project. He says things went sour after the non-Indigenous-owned group, RF Now, wanted to take control over the installation, leaving the 48 First Nations involved upset.
We consider this a form of economic genocide. We have the plans. We have the plan that is going to make it work, that we see positive economic effects in our communities. We want to reap all the benefits of majority infrastructure projects on our traditional lands.
According to Crate, RF Now only has the support of one First Nation community and has done little to work with others.
We've done a lot of engagement with the communities. We've done our duty to consult with the First Nations. They haven't. It's only just recently they've now tried to engage the communities.
CAC Dene Chief Tony Powderhorn says lack of cooperation from the government and RF Now are putting communities at risk.
If only both sides can meet and try to work out some sort of agreement, we can get this thing. Like, this thing's supposed to be started a year ago, and they're still going back and forth over and who should rent the line.
Crate says it's just bad business on Ottawa's part.
The federal government to go ahead and make a decision which basically leaves out the communities, again, from having any economic opportunities and benefits for their community. It's a clear indication that there'll be ongoing concerns with the federal government if that's how they're going to conduct business.
It is expected the federal government and the province of Manitoba will award the joint contract worth $63 million to RF Now. Chief Crate and Clear Sky Connections have sent letters to the Prime Minister and Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister urging them to reconsider the decision. APTN questioned the federal government on its decision to award the contract to a non-Indigenous owned group, but we did not receive a response by airtime. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Quebec's only Indigenous post-secondary institution is offering new programs with a First Nations language option. We'll have that story when we come back. Hello again. Recognized for alternative and culturally adapted educational services, Kiuna is the only Indigenous post-secondary institution in Quebec. This year, they're offering new programs with a First Nations language option. Danielle Rochette reports.
Students are already at work at Kiuna College. It's located in the Abenaki community of Odanak. Since opening in 2011, 92 students have graduated. 90% of them are now at university, some even at master level. According to Associate Director Prudence Anis, they needed the language component to their programs.
Both the need to provide this kind of training and the need expressed by the students motivated us to develop that program. And it took about 2 years to develop it.
20-year-old Darren Germain is from the Innu community of Mastoyach. He's in his third year of social sciences and knows there is a need for language education.
Moi, je trouve que c'est vraiment bien parce que ça va préparer ces étudiants-là à devenir, je veux dire, ils vont être prêts à devenir enseignants après ça et transmettre la langue. Et il y a une problématique dans les écoles primaires et secondaires dans nos communautés, c'est que les enseignants, ils parlent pas nos langues.
Nika Notawa from the Atikamekw community of Manawan just started at Kiuna a few days ago. She's one of the 12 students who enroll in the new program and is excited about speaking her language.
Je trouve ça important parce que c'est ça qui fait ton identité, je trouve.
And she doesn't just plan to practice. Ottawa wants to put her language education to use.
C'est soit devenir linguiste ou aller dans la traduction. Il y a beaucoup de choses qui m'intéressent dans le fond, là, côté langue, parce que j'ai toujours aimé apprendre de nouvelles langues.
Innu poet Josephine Bacon will be teaching at Kiuna this year.
J'adore ça. Je trouve que je travaille dans un milieu qui me ressemble. Parce que tu entends parler Atikamekw, tu entends parler Innu, puis tu les regardes, puis je regarde les jeunes, puis ils sont vraiment contents qu'il y ait des cours de langue. Il y en a un qui me disait ça devrait être, il dit comme le français, ça doit être un cours obligatoire.
But for Anis, the biggest challenge lays in providing all the adequate services to the students to succeed.
We really have to develop services that help to support them in every aspect of their life.
This year, 3 First Nations languages will be offered: Abenaki, Innu, and Atikamekw. But there are plans for more in the future. Danielle Rochette, APTN National News, Odanak, Quebec.
Well, that's your APTN News Weekend. Enjoy your long weekend, and we'll be back with more news for you on Tuesday. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.